as we're seeing some reports that Border Patrol agents, some, not all, will be leaving the state of Minnesota as Border Czar Tom Homan taking charge of that operation in the Twin Cities. And obviously adjacent to that conversation is around a potential upcoming government shutdown, at least a partial one, as conversations right now about funding for DHS and lots of different leaders speaking out right now about that. As I want to put up a post from Cami Mondeaux of Deseret News saying some deja vu this week as Senator Chuck Schumer out with a new statement saying the responsibility to prevent a partial government shutdown is on Leader Thune and Senate Republicans, saying, quote, if Leader Thune puts those 5 bills on the floor this week, we can pass them right now. If not, Republicans will again be responsible for another government shutdown. Senator Thune, the majority leader, says Senate will move forward with funding bill as one package when they get back tomorrow, that being on Tuesday, as Dems are calling for Thune to split the DHS from the full package. Let's get into this here on Live Now from Fox with Cami Mondeaux of Deseret News. Thank you so much for joining us in these 6 potentially funding bills coming together as one. What's the likelihood, if at all, that we could see a government shutdown this Friday due to that?
I think we've seen the risk of a shutdown really increase over the last few days. I mean, just last week, we had a couple Senate Democrats who said they would vote for this upcoming package, who now have all said they would not vote to advance, including Patty Murray, who is the top Democrat appropriator who actually negotiated this package. And so I think it's really highly likely right now, if they don't remove the DHS portion from the spending package, we could enter maybe a short shutdown. But even if they do remove it, they would need to get the House on board to approve the 5 spending bills that remain. So getting the House back would be a whole other issue. And so I think right now it's very likely that we do see a short shutdown.
Yeah, and obviously they're trying to split this up. The Democrats saying they will pass the 5 without the DHS bill. What else are we hearing from Senator John Thune? Because it's not so long ago that we had the longest shutdown in U.S. history, some 43 long days. I imagine senators still kind of grappling with that. The fallout from that is still very effect. Is that on their minds at all?
Right, because as we did see, Senate Democrats definitely did not have an appetite for a shutdown heading into this next deadline. That was why last week you saw a few House Democrats vote for it. You saw a lot of these Senate Democrats saying this is the best option we're going to have. Thune has not been as public with his statements since this latest ICE shooting over the weekend. He did have a statement that it is a good thing that Homan is now going to Minnesota. You have a spokesperson for Thune saying they're going to move forward with the package as it is with all 6. I'm sure we're going to hear more once the Senate is actually back tomorrow afternoon. But as of right now, you're seeing a lot of Democrats who did not have the appetite for a shutdown now saying we need to do something different or else we cannot support this package as it is right now.
Who are some key players in these conversations? Because obviously some 53 Republican senators out there. What other members are you keeping your eye on in case which way they go?
Absolutely. So, there's always going to be the kind of look at the 10 Democratic senators who voted to end the shutdown last time. But so far, all of them, except for John Fetterman, have said they're going to vote against this bill. Fetterman, I think you're going to be the only Democrat right now who will vote for the spending package as it is. But some others to keep their eye on. Susan Collins is a Republican, but keeping an eye on her as she engages in some bipartisan negotiations, probably with Jeanne Shaheen, who has always been kind of a good negotiator between Republicans and Democrats. She voted to help reopen the government in November. Of course, keeping an eye on, key players like Durbin and Schumer who are in leadership. I think senators will really take a clue from what they do. And so far, those 2 are a no as well.
Are we expecting to hear from senators that have real impact of ICE and Border Patrol? You mentioned Durbin because he was at the forefront, very outspoken about what was going on in terms of midway blitz there in Chicago, in his home state of Illinois. Are we expecting the same sort of conversations with senators that have their constituents impacted really in reality to be more outspoken?
Yes, especially like, Amy Klobuchar, who is a senator from Minnesota. I expect that we will hear a lot from her, especially as she's gearing up to run for governor in that state. I think she will also be a key player. She is a no right now, but she could be a key player in those negotiations. She does really well with bipartisan talks, and she is good with working across the aisle. So she may also be a key player to watch here.
Let's talk about some of the possibilities, because the Democrats, after the tragedy over the weekend in Minneapolis, digging their heels in about this. Angus King also kind of on the fence, saying he doesn't have an appetite for a shutdown, but in light of what's going on, he probably couldn't vote for this. If they do split it up and it eventually goes to the House, how complicated could that get?
It could get quite complicated. This is the most complicated appropriations bill that we see every year, regardless of what's going on. Homeland Security is just so partisan in how they want to, push their different policies in this bill. And so even if they do have to go back to the drawing board and renegotiate this, it could take a while, considering, Republicans obviously want ramped up spending for DHS, for ICE, and all the immigration officers. And Democrats now very clearly, some are saying they want to abolish it altogether. They want to decrease the spending. They want to put more guardrails on this agency. And so even if they do have to go back to the drawing board and they somehow are successful in removing it from this package, it'll take a lot of time, I think, to have to renegotiate those terms.
What else are we missing here? Obviously, if they do come together and there's still negotiation, appropriations negotiations take longer than a week. So even if we do get a partial shutdown, they could still be ongoing with optimism. What else are we missing? What else are you keeping your eye on?
Right. I think the biggest thing here is that the whole conversation around not funding DHS right now is focused on these ICE agents and how that agency operates. But even if they do shut down and this DHS bill does not get funded, it's really going to affect everything else that Homeland Security touches, like TSA and the defense and all of that. ICE itself still has a lot of money sitting in its reserves thanks to the big, beautiful bill last summer. It has millions of dollars it can tap into. So even if they do leave DHS unfunded, ICE can still operate at pretty much the same levels for at least a time. So I think just keeping an eye on everything else that will be affected in a shutdown while they fight on this one tiny aspect of the government funding conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point, a good perspective, because we even saw during that 43-day shutdown, ICE, Border Patrol, still very much in full swing with some of those immigration crackdowns in various cities. All right, Cami, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Obviously, a busy week. We'll see with the deadline on Friday and how close we get to it, potentially another shutdown looming. Thanks again.
Thanks.
All right, thanks so much. All right, great conversation as always, talking about this 6 bills, appropriations bills moving forward. We'll see if they get split up into 5 and 1, but Senator Majority Leader right now, John Thune, pulling them together all in one package. The Democrats saying that they potentially will not vote for that. And we also heard today earlier from White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt being asked about some of these conversations, negotiations there about funding the government, about funding DHS in light after the tragedy unfolding over the weekend as federal officials in the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy. Let's listen into this.
Willing to separate DHS funding from other funding bills in order to avoid a broader shutdown?
Look, at this point, the White House supports the bipartisan work that was done to advance the bipartisan appropriations package, and we want to see that passed. Policy discussions on immigration in Minnesota are happening. Look, the president is leading those discussions, as evidenced by his correspondence with Governor Walz this morning, but that should not be at the expense of government funding for the American people, which would include, as you know, Alex, FEMA funding, and we are in the midst of the storm that took place over the weekend, and many Americans are still being impacted by that. So we absolutely do not want to see that funding lapse, and we want the Senate to move forward with passing the bipartisan appropriations package that was negotiated on a bipartisan basis.